Welcome to The Pillars, the podcast of the 363rd ISR Wing of the United States Air Force. I'm Chaplain Jim Bridgham.
I'm Captain Jerry Walker.
On each episode of The Pillars, we find a brief resilience topic so you can practically fix any potential roadblocks you encounter and finish a better wingman, airman, and leader. So let's dive into this week's topic, which is about personal growth.
So, Chaplain, what does personal growth mean to you?
I think it's that decision we have to improve ourselves. And it has to be a choice. I think so many people I run into, I'll ask the question, well, what book have you read recently? What are your goals in the gym? What are your personal family objectives? What's your vision for your family? And I'm surprised how often people don't have those written down or have really even thought about it.
Well, I think the difficulty comes from mixed messages we receive from a variety of other sources about what we should be pursuing. So, maybe from your family, you grew up in a situation where there were expectations, whether those were directly communicated to you or whether you just learned them through your normal socialization process growing up about what you should be pursuing. And so these could be things like if you grew up in a family where military service was the norm, that expectation, whether it was explicitly communicated to you or not, can become one of those objectives that you internalize. And so you just feel like that is what you should be doing. Very similar to some of the messages that we get within the Air Force. So I'm sure many of you know that there are some informal boxes you have to check in order to promote. A good example of this is getting your CCAF. And a lot of times when we, at least the chaplain and I as helping professionals, ask people, well, what are you working on right now? And what are you working towards? I'll have an airman say, well, I'm in the process of getting my CCAF. And that's great and everything, but the answer is, I don't know. It's just something I have to do.
Yeah, and it's that idea of I'm not shoulding all over myself. And I hate to say that like that, but we sometimes think we just should do something or I don't know, or we don't have a clear objective. And I think that's where you're getting at.
Right. So if the purpose for doing something is just to check an arbitrary box, then you have to step back and ask yourself, well, why am I really doing this? What is my motivation? And if you feel like you're not getting something out of that effort, then you're not going to be very motivated to expend effort and to make the requisite sacrifices to achieve that goal. And so what this concept of personal growth comes back to, for me anyway, is we need to be very directive and intentional about how we channel our efforts. And that's when it comes to school, when it comes to work, when it comes to family, and to find those drives within ourselves that will propel us forward and help us remain motivated on our tasks.
And on there you said how to define where we want and how to channel that effort. And we only have so much effort.
Right.
So how would someone come about? Let's say someone comes in your office and they only have so much time in a week and they're trying to grow themselves. They want to be better. What are some questions you'd ask them?
Well, one of the first things I ask them is, what are you working towards? In other words, what is your vision that you're trying to achieve? And so this could be as simple as, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road? And what I've come to find is that some people have some very unrealistic expectations about what that is. Maybe they've set their sights so high that they're almost unachievable. Or on the other end, maybe they haven't really given much thought to where they want to be, and so they don't have a clear vision for where they want to go. And you see this in how people will expend a lot of effort towards a number of different unrelated side projects or be working on a number of different tasks at once, but then they lose steam and they lose that motivation, and a lot of those projects go unfinished. And it's like you don't have a clear direction, which makes sense. If you don't know where you're going, then it's easy to stray from that path. So a lot of times I work with people on trying to channel their efforts towards whatever that main goal is. So if your vision is, in 20 years from now, I want to have this kind of degree and be in this kind of job, or maybe have this kind of financial security, or this is what I want my family life to look like, then my next question is, okay, what are the steps required to get you towards that goal? So, let's say if you want to get a job in some kind of business firm, let's say finance, for example. Well, what do you need in order to get there? And that's a question worth pursuing, because now you're starting to look at the requisite steps towards accomplishing that goal. You have to actually do some research and find out, is there a certain kind of degree that you have to obtain? Are there connections or experiences that you have to work towards? And what is this going to cost me, both in terms of money and time, and then what other things may I have to give up in order to make those things happen? And now we're starting to get into forming a concrete plan for how you're going to get there.
I think that's key, though. It's you go forward to the vision and then backcast. You go back. Mm-hmm. What are those steps? And one of the things I'll ask, because I see purposelessness all the time, or people have this idea, well, I'm going to get out because of my career and make this large amount of money. Well, it just doesn't happen like that, not at all. So it's you really find your vision, you know what you want to do, you identify it. But a thing I'll give, an exercise I'll present, is this idea of what's your ideal day. So this idea in the future, you go in and say, what's my ideal day? And don't just say, oh, it's going to be great, I'm going to get out of work and get up, go to work, work out a little bit and come home, have a great family, and have a beer and go to bed. Like, no. What time are you getting out of bed? Oh, well, I'm getting up, 5 a.m. Okay, what's the first thing you do? What do you see out the window? And it sounds like excruciating detail to go through that ideal day, but it gives you an idea of what you want. What's that day going to look like? Some people might say, hey, I want to go become a medical doctor, and I want to work 5 hours per day. That's not going to happen with that line of work. So you have to say, well, does this align with my vision? What other things would you suggest to someone?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with visualizing your ideal day. And a lot of these goals that we have, these visions that we have for our ideal selves in the future, they don't happen overnight. So the example you gave as a medical doctor, that takes a lot of years of painstaking work to get to the point where you can actually practice. And so it's not something you can just throw a whole bunch of energy and effort into in one short burst and expect to achieve. It's a grind. But like most things that we think of in terms of success or stability, it takes a lot of work on the front end in order to get there. So what I try to remind people is, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you don't necessarily have to knock all of your requirements out at once. If you've got this vision for where you want to be in the future, try to do at least a little bit every day to work towards that incrementally. Because just like any plan, if you expend all your effort at the outset, then you're going to have nothing left for the remaining 25.2 miles, right? If you just sprint that first mile of the marathon. So think about what small steps you can take now to start inching towards your goal, and you'll see the payoff eventually. I actually had when I was in graduate school, I had a professor who was extremely prolific. This guy has published hundreds and hundreds of articles. He's written book chapters. He's a very well-known name in the psychological community. And so many people couldn't understand how in the world did he achieve all this, especially at such a young age. He was mid-30s, so very, very accomplished in a short period of time. And what he kept coming back to was, I try to sit down at my computer and just write for about 15 minutes a day. I don't let my brain interfere. I don't start to process and overthink what I'm writing. I just sit down and write. And he said, out of that, sometimes he'll just hit a block and maybe only get a few sentences in that whole 15 minutes. Other times he hits flow and he's able to write even longer than he originally anticipated. But just those incremental steps each and every day has helped him publish hundreds and at this point probably thousands of papers, just from taking that approach of what can I do today to help me get a little bit more of the way towards that goal. So I would ask all of you, if you have these visions for your future, try to set that up as an expectation for yourself. When you wake up in the morning, every day think, what do I want to accomplish today? What am I going to do that's going to help me get a little bit closer towards this goal?
Yep, and that I'd call an intention for your day. Like starting out your day with what's the intention, what's the goal, what's my aim or objective today. So you take that macro, like what do you want to be at the end of your life? What do you want to see? What do you want to do with your life? And I would even say further from a larger perspective is, what do you want said? And this sounds morbid, but at your graveyard service, when you're buried, your funeral, what do you want them to talk about? And start there. Well, I want them to say how great of a family person I was. Well, that's great. You want them to say how great of an airman you were, a senior NCO or a senior officer. Okay, those are outstanding things. So now we go further back now to today. So you've broken it down from that. We've talked about breaking it down, going in the past and saying, what does today look like? How am I going to show up today? Because the thing is, you can't just show up and maybe not give your best effort and then expect to be a chief someday or a colonel. It doesn't work like that. Now, one piece too I wanted to add about writing it down. Ben Franklin used to carry a journal with him, and he'd write down things all the time. There's a genius, a chess champion, Josh, Waitskin, and he also does the same thing. If you notice, a lot of folks carry around notebooks or journals. I would recommend too that it's not like you're going to go on this mountaintop experience. At least most of us, personally as a chaplain, I don't go up to this mountaintop and I hear, from on high, this is what I'm supposed to do. It's usually these small intuitive hits that throughout the day say, hey, I really enjoy serving people. Hey, I really enjoy helping people. Or I don't enjoy this, or I like that. Write those things down, because that goes to why you're here on earth and what you're supposed to do with your life. And I think those things help us to find out what we're attuned to.
That's a good insight. I mean, there is something to be said about expressive writing. Not necessarily like you're keeping a diary or a journal, but just writing out some of those thoughts, those gee whiz moments that you have throughout the day. Because then you can look back on them and they start to come together and fit into this format of, what do I want to be and who do I want to be? And that'll help you work towards getting there. And there's something magical about just writing things down. For whatever reason, the way that we think about things through the day is so abstract. It's 100 miles per hour, and in our brain, you've got these thoughts and emotions flying around so quickly. It's hard to focus on any one of them at a given point in time. But when you sit down and actually write something, let's say in a journal, you're forcing your brain to slow down, and you're making those abstract concepts concrete, and you're taking the time to focus on them, think about the meaning behind them, and sometimes something as simple as just saying a word or a phrase out loud or writing it down on a piece of paper can bring you so much more clarity. Yes. So I think that's a great tool, Chaplain. You could sit down and say, here's my vision for the future. This is where I want to be 5 years from now. And be specific. If you have self-improvement goals related to fitness, write those down. If they're about your finances, where you are right now and where you'd like to be, write those down. If they pertain to your family, where do you want to be? Write those down. And then that will help give you a channel for how you can direct your efforts in each of those directions.
And one thing, a mentor of mine had sat me down and made me do this, and this was extremely annoying, so this is just up front, and I'm sure if he listens to this, he'll appreciate it. But he actually had me write down a life plan in PowerPoint where not only at each stage of my career what I'd be doing, what education I'd be pursuing, where I'd be living in this ideal 30-year plan, but also how old my children would be, how old my wife would be, how old I would be each year, what grade would they be in, etc. It was unbelievably painful to do, and yet it was so valuable, because although I haven't hit everything on there, I'm surprised how much I've done, and it allows me to say, okay, well, if I make a decision to go to this specific school, whether it's graduate school or a war college or whatnot, how will it affect my children's high school or grade school choices? It's hard when we move kids from grade to grade to grade. So our choices have ramifications on ourselves and our families, our communities. And so what are you going to do with it? So it's important to do. So if you ever do want to go through that exercise, I'm happy to do it with you. But really, if you do it at home, all you really do is write down what you want to do, where you want to do it in your career, specific to years, and just write down ages, where you'll be ideally. I know we can't forecast what our next assignment is, and if you can, give me a call. I could use some help, but most of us can't. And so it's just this ideal life vision, how everything goes if it goes the way you want.
And that's a really good point. So while we're talking about the concepts of personal growth, we can't forget the context in which that personal growth happens. We have a number of people who rely on us, whether directly or indirectly, and they're going to be affected by our choices. So, while we're pursuing these avenues of personal growth, we can't forget the other responsibilities and the roles that we have. So, thinking back, to those of you who've taken Psych 101, you'll remember something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that's what we're talking about today has to do more with the top end of Maslow's hierarchy, which is the self-actualization piece. But we can't neglect the other 4 levels of that pyramid. So survival, safety, social, and self-esteem. If those needs aren't met, it's going to be really difficult to focus on self-actualization. So while you're pursuing this personal growth, I encourage you to also ensure that you're having all the things that you need in those other stages, and maybe even draw back from your personal growth at time to time when you realize that certain areas of your life are having to compensate for that pursuit. I know personally in my own life, I've pursued some of my own goals, some educational dreams that I have. And while it was great for me, I saw it started to have a negative effect on my family because it was taking me away from them, and I was having to dedicate so much time towards those pursuits. That was making my social life and really my esteem suffer. And so as a result of that, I had to make the decision that those areas of my life were much more important than my own personal growth pursuits. It doesn't mean you have to give it up entirely, but like I was saying before, try to make that balance to where you're not expending yourself too much in one direction, and also making time for fun. We all need to blow off steam from time to time, so try not to focus so much on personal growth that you're not giving yourself time to decompress as well.
And next week, we're going to go over goals and setting some specific goals. And just as an idea, just to highlight that idea of fun, I have some really specific personal growth goals, and I have 10 per year I hit. And I focus on 3 at a time. And some of them are learning and reading books. I try to hit a large number of books each year that I can read, whether it's through audiobooks or whether it's through physical. But then another one of my book goals is to hit a certain level for a character within a video game, to get to level 100 within Halo 5 for all 8 of us still playing that game. But that's one of the things that's a personal goal of mine, and that's okay to have a fun goal. I have a professional goals, personal goals, family goals, but fun is so important because you can totally over-optimize your personal life by focusing so much on personal growth. You can get to a point where it's just not very fun, and honestly, life's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be. So we need to find enjoyment. Is there anything else we hit or need to hit?
No, I think that about wraps it up. And as always, if you have any questions, any concerns, any comments for us on today's podcast, please feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we'd love to chat with you more about personal growth.
Yeah, it's awesome. And again, thank you for what you do, and thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you and your families and the dedication you have to serve, and we hope you have an outstanding week.